Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker. We are broadcasting from the Big 550 KTRS before the game as the pre-match show. If you're new to Flyover Footy, we are a St. Louis-based soccer podcast that goes deep into all things St. Louis City SC, as well as anything else going on in the world of soccer in St. Louis. I'm joined here with Santiago Beltran, who you may be familiar with as one of the Spanish broadcasters for the club and one of our co-hosts here on Flyover Footy. Santiago, how are you?
Doing great, Matt. It's been a great week. 12 points out of 12. So, what else can you ask for?
The dream continues, right? It's a surreal, and it makes it even that much more exciting to keep talking about it week in and week out.
Yeah, it's great, and I don't think anybody imagined that the team was gonna be on a 4 game winning streak to start the season. So let's see
No,
if we can make it 5 out of 5.
quite the opposite. And one thing I want to get to after we talk about the Quakes match last week is a bit of those shifting expectations. So not to get too ahead of ourselves here, but the discussion around City is markedly different as we sit here approaching match week 5 than it was going into the season. So much so that it seems like we're starting to hear murmurs from some of the national media that it would be at this point a disappointment for City not to make the playoffs, which is just a wild thought to consider.
Yeah, especially after just 4 weeks. But yeah, if you think about it, 12 points, and I'm not gonna say numbers here because I don't like to jinx things.
No.
But if you think about how many points are needed to make the playoffs and how many games are left, yeah, in theory it should happen, but have to take it one game at a time.
Yeah, and like we've seen so far in these first 4 matches, the sustainability of the system seems to be working. It seems to be shining through pretty well. But let's take it back a little bit before we go into Real Salt Lake, which is our Week 5 opponent. Let's look back at how City faced against the Quakes, and I think this to me was the highlight of the season so far, in the sense that we weren't coming from behind at any point in the season. For the first time all year, we never had a deficit to overcome. It was kind of our match to own for the duration, our game to play, and we really made the most of it with all of these chances created, opportunities, the possession lined up well with what we were wanting. And the interesting thing to me is we noted it in the press conference this week that this was the second time we saw somewhat of a 4-4-2 formation as opposed to our away matches, which skewed more towards a 4-2-3-1. Now, whether that is out of necessity from some of the injuries and unavailabilities that we had or not, that's debatable, and we should probably talk about that. But before I get your take on what you thought, how the match started and kind of flowed, let's consider that the starting lineup that St. Louis rolled out for the Quakes match was Berkey and net, like he always has. Back line was John Nelson, Kyle Hebert, Lucas Bartlett, and Jake Nerwinski. Bartlett obviously stepping in for Tim Parker, who is unavailable due to a groin injury. Edward Leuven, Indy Vasilev in the midfield with Jared Stroud and Tomas Ostrak as our wingers. And then up top, Klaus, along with Nico Gioacchini, who had his second start of the season. So with that 4-4-2 rotation kind of going, I'm sorry, I mentioned Ostrak, didn't I? It was Alm.
Yes, and yes.
I saw your face. I saw your face, and so I'm thinking, all right, what did I mess up on? And then I realized Ostrak didn't start this game. It was Alm.
Yeah, I started to think, I was like, wait, he didn't start, but I started to go back and think about it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure
You
he
know,
didn't start, but
Santi, I'm fairly certain at this point that it's a host's curse because Phil's had some of those slip ups, and I've thought each time, I'm like, oh man, how could he have done that? And I did it myself. Okay, so Alm did it,
yeah.
and we miss Phil to death. Obviously, not here with us. He's on vacation with his family. Hope he's having a blast, and we'll talk to him next week. But that's our starting 11 going into the Quakes match. It had success. What did you think about the starting 11? What did you think about their performance, especially early on?
Well, to start with, I was surprised. Well, a little bit surprised to see Bartlett in the starting lineup, and just it was just because he was signed recently, and even though he had been training with the team and he got some minutes the previous game, wasn't thinking he was gonna start to replace Tim Parker. I was thinking more like maybe Josh Jarrow, maybe Bell, but Bell had not played, so maybe it didn't make sense. But he started and he played really well. So
Yeah,
surprised that he started and surprised the way he played.
and I think a lot of us had that thought too, because while he's been with the team in camp for the duration of preseason, there was that very late announcement and very late signing of him to the first team roster. And so he kind of saw a very quick progression where he came in late
Hmm.
against Charlotte, I believe it was, and then started this match. So do you think it speaks more to Bartlett and his ability and the way he's impressed the staff, or does it speak sort of to some of those other guys that you mentioned as far as what the staff might think of them?
I think, and Bradley Carnell has said it multiple times. There is always competition going on, and all these guys are fighting for minutes, and the team, and that proves the team has depth in the position. And the one thing I like about Bartlett is that he's really tall, so that helps with the crosses and with the set pieces. But yeah, I think the coaching staff has seen great things from him, and obviously he came as a trialist, but he has gone through that progression, and at the end earned that spot and showed with his play in that game that he can do it, and he will probably get the start again, especially if especially with Kyle Heaver out, and we don't know what's going to happen with Tim Parker. We're going to talk a little bit about that later,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think he earned his spot at least for this next game.
Yeah, and it's wild to consider going into a game only in week 5, Lucas Bartlett is considered the reliable center back starter. It's just kind of a wild thought considering where we just were, like you said. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's look at some of the highlights of the match. Let's go over some of these goals, because the impressive thing about this team wasn't just their overall performance, it was how some of these goals were scored. So let me set the stage for the first half goals. How about we start there? So the first half, we got started in on the scorecard around the 34th minute with a goal by Nicholas Gioacchini. So Leuven started this play. He won the ball in our defensive third, had some quick passes between him and Klaus, which led to a push from Leuven to Nelson on the left-hand side. Nelson received the long ball and had himself just a beauty of a cross deep into Gioacchini, who found himself in the box, right place, right time. And it appeared, at least from the MLS's perspective, that there was a slight tip from one of the players. Somebody touched it from the Quakes. Gioacchini was able to gather it back up and finish cleanly. But with that goal in the 34th minute, Gioacchini obviously getting on the scorecard for the first time as a member of St. Louis City, his first goal of the season, just kind of cementing his place on this team again. But the work that John Nelson did to create this opportunity, the work that Leuven did again to start and facilitate that, regardless of if MLS is going to give them an assist, which they didn't, I think we
Yeah.
can't detract from their participation in that goal, just like they have been for just about every chance we've created.
Yeah, for sure. Even if it's not officially an assist, yeah, for us it was an assist and great play. And when the play started with those quick passes, like, oh my God, the team has numbers like 3 against 4. But then when it went to Nelson, I think he waited a second or two, and
Mhm.
then the defense was kind of back into place. But still, he found Joaquini, and it was a great finish by Joaquini, finding that ball and fighting for it, and great finish. And it's great to see Joaquini scoring his first goal with City. I think that will give him a lot of confidence for the rest of the season too.
And I really liked what Joachini said on one of the pods that Tom Timmerman from the Post Dispatch did, and he had Joachini on as a guest, and the idea being that Joachini knew where he needed to be in that run of play, so much so that he made it seem like he looked at Nelson, saw where Nelson's eyes were, and was able to position himself perfectly to receive that ball. which if you think about how quickly that play developed and the things that Gioacchini had to think about in addition to knowing where Nelson was and to be able to position himself there, to see his eyes and able to know, all right, he's looking to put the ball in this certain spot in the box, and he was able to get himself in that certain spot to collect the ball. That, to me, more than anything, I think that we're going to talk about here, speaks to the teamwork and just how on the same page everybody is in this system and with how the ball is going to progress at any given time.
Yeah, and it's another one more of those things that when you think about a new team, an expansion team, that it takes them a while to get to know each other, get to know the system. But this team, everybody by now, the players know where everyone is, where they can find each other. Like they're so used to their teammates, which is great to see. And I think that also proves that what the team did with bringing some of the guys back in July, August was great, because
Mm-hmm.
you have a good base of 11, 12 players that play together for the last 6, 7 months, and make it easier when preseason started and you try to integrate some newer guys.
And especially with those newer guys, some of them being in that sense, Joaquini and Nelson, who were able to, I think, take advantage of those guys who coming into this preseason knew the system because of that, and so you're able to share that knowledge and kind of get other players on the same page quicker. So I think going into the half is the goal of the game, more or less. I think is a fairly easy way to say it. So stoppage time at the end of the first half, Klaus basically the same idea where there was a build up from Nico to Klaus, and then Klaus just kind of starts running downfield with the ball like a madman. With Taylor Twellman would describe him as a deer trying to get out of a car, and he's just bullying over people. And he eventually, I think, loses the ball maybe 2 or 3 times, and still is able to collect it mid stride to get that ball in the back of the net. Of course, because the opposing team touched it, no assist to anybody. It was another unassisted goal. What do you think about Klaus's ability to play the ball, regardless of how it looks? His ability to play the ball in and around the box, facilitating, or in this case, taking it himself.
Yeah, he's so great with his feet, and like yeah, he it's just like he's big, but at the same time he has a he has great feet, and he can control the ball and protect the ball, and at the same time he can like go through defenders and still keep the ball. So that's a great skill, and I think he's surprising the league. And every podcast, every recap of the week that I hear, Klaus is always mentioned about his ability, his skills. So it's great to see that he has been involved in obviously 3 goals. He also had an assist, so
Yep.
he has been involved in every game, either with goals or assists, and it's just like the dream start for him in the league. Because sometimes you get these DPs that, yeah, in paper they are great, but it takes them a while to start scoring, to get used to the league. So it's great to see that he hit it right off the bat, and is doing great. But yeah, I love what he's doing, and yeah, you can talk about deer getting out of a car, 42-year old, but yeah, he's the real deal, and he's very important for this team.
Well, in reality, he's a 26-year-old who is on his way to continuing to set a goal contribution record for the club, at least, as he looks to continue it against RSL. But right now, taking what Klaus has been able to do in the first 4 games in 4 straight goal contributions over to our third goal scorer in this game, who was, like I wanted to say he started, Tomas Ostrak, when in fact he subbed in the second half in around the 57th, 58th minute. And it took him 10 minutes to finally get on the score sheet. No time at all. And we had been looking for this from Ostrak. We knew what he was capable of last year. We knew that he's how good he is, as good as Klaus is on the ball. Ostrak makes it look like it is a theater show going on here. He makes it look like he was born to do this and he can make any single player look silly. With the highlight that City posted on one of their socials this week with the nutmeg, it was just an incredible performance by him as a sub. And his shot was the first goal that City has scored this year outside of the 18-yard box. And it was off of two different rebounds, able to collect it and then just seamlessly move across the box on the outside and score with his left foot, which you so accurately described as the second time he's ever scored with his left foot, the first time being last year with City too.
Yeah, I remember last year after he scored that goal, that came up, and I think it was John Hackward that mentioned this is the
Yep.
first time he scored with his left foot. So I don't know, that stayed in my mind, and
I
when I
loved it.
saw that goal, I was like, oh wow, that's his second, his first with City and left footed again. So yeah, it's great. And speaking of confidence, it's great to see him on the score sheet because obviously the last two games he didn't start,
Mhm.
but now with this goal, I think he's gonna get more confidence. And as you were saying, like I don't know if it is that we expect, like it's not like he's not playing well. He's still doing great things defensively and offensively. He has had some contributions too, but I think maybe from what we saw on what we saw when CD2 played last year, I think we had very high expectations for him, but this will give him a lot of confidence. I actually asked Carnell last week about the decision to have Ostrak start from the bench, and he basically downplayed it. He said, no, it's more a tactical adjustment. He's still a great contributor, and but it's great to see him scoring. I think that will give him more confidence, and we will see more things from him going forward.
Absolutely. And whether it's Alm starting, Ostrak starting, either one of them provide a massive boost on that right-hand side in the second half. But I think but before we dive into some of the news going into the RSL match, this game also, besides those individual chances, really described a St. Louis City match. The possession was 45% to 54.9 on the Quake side. We had 20 shots. They had 13. 8 of ours were on goal. Only 2 of their shots were on goal. Now, mind you, they were some pretty amazing shots that Berkey had some excellent saves, which led to Berkey having his first ever clean sheet, something we definitely should not overlook in this match, despite the fact that he had a 1.91 expected goals against, meaning that of those 2 shots, by any statistical measure of those shots, almost 2 of them would have gone in. And in his ability to, among other things, block an amazing short strike from Cade Cowell, Berkey taking a clean sheet doesn't just describe our defensive performance, but it describes kind of the mental hump I think that he was able to get over by the first clean sheet. Entering a league is a big deal. Any clean sheet is a big deal. But once you get that first out of the way, kind of like St. Louis City was getting their first win out of the way early, I think you can snowball this into future matches. RSL being kind of a perfect opportunity based on how they play. But, what did you think of Berkey's performance in this one as we look ahead to RSL?
Well, Berkey and the defense performed great. Obviously, Berkey made that save, but I would have not thought that this was a game to get that clean sheet just because San Jose, their front three, Kate
Mhm.
Cowell, Ebovisi, Espinosa, they had been doing great this season.
Yep.
And San Jose came to this game in great form. And Carnell had also said it pre-match. He was like, they should have 9 points, but obviously Thiago Almada had a different opinion and gave Atlanta that victory. But it was a team that was coming in good form and dangerous front three. But yeah, the defense, even with Tim Parker out, Lucas Bartlett stepped in and Berkey made that save. So great for the team, and we will see more clean sheets hopefully coming soon.
Yeah, and so let's pivot to that. So coming out of the Quakes match, we set the record for most wins to start a season by an expansion side. So we have that to build off of. We've won 2 away, we've won 2 at home. We have that to build off of. There's the clean sheet, there's the 7 different goal scorers by St. Louis City. But this is far from a 100% healthy St. Louis side going into RSL. From an injury perspective, from an international perspective, because as we all know, right now we're in an international window. We have players from St. Louis. We have Miguel Perez, who has gone over to the U19s for the U.S., and we have Kyle Hebert, who received a late injury replacement call up for the Canadian men's national team, replacing Kamal Miller from Montreal. So Hebert joins for 2 matches in Nations League, where they play Curacao and Honduras. And actually, we can check that one out at 8 p.m. on Saturday. So if you're listening to this on the Big 550 KTRS, you might be able to tune in to Paramount Plus to see Kyle Hebert play right before
What?
we pick up the city match.
Right, like watch the first 30 minutes and then switch to cities match, right?
Exactly. So I mean, you have the exciting things, but then you have kind of the antithesis of that. You have last week we were without Blom, we were without Parker. We're kind of looking at a potential similar situation because, as we know, Parker's groin injury, he just now returned to camp or returned to training this week in individual drills on Tuesday and Wednesday. And as we're recording this on Thursday night, we saw him participate in team activities for the first time. Same kind of thing with Blom, where we found out today that Blom has cleared the health and safety protocols, where he was out for the past, I want to say, week and a half.
Yeah, about a week
Yeah,
and a half.
week and a half. And so he's healthy in that sense. So he's rejoined the team. He was training with the team on Thursday's practice, but both of them are kind of being worked up. You know, we heard that Parker had a much lower load day today on Thursday, and they're looking at him the next 48 hours. So by the time this airs on KTRS, it'll be a little more known, but I think they'll need that entire time to evaluate him. So you can't really say until we see the lineups how he's going to go. Blom to me is a little easier to judge. I don't see a whole lot of ways that Blom sees the game day roster on Saturday, knowing how his fitness was with his health and safety protocols and how he was sick. You know, he was in bed from what we know, and knowing his fitness has to get up. And his first day back in training was Thursday. I don't know what you think that might look like as far as our game day roster, but I can see us going into RSL without both of those players.
Yeah, especially Blom because yeah, he was back. He's clear from the health and safety protocol, but he lost basically 10 days of training, and he has to regain that fitness. The other thing is that City will be playing in the altitude, so I think he's not gonna go to Salt Lake. Parker will be a last minute decision, but I think, and Carnell said it today, like, do you risk putting in on this game, but
Yep.
at the same time, you risk losing him for longer? So I think the team, knowing that 12 points out of 12 points has basically some credit in the bank account, I think they will go with the players they have. Lucas Bartlett already proved last week that he's a good piece. He's a good player in terms of adding depth, and maybe we'll see something from Josh Jarrow or from John Bell. Um, but I think the team is not going to risk Tim Parker.
And as we found out today from a question during the press conference, Bradley Carnell said that John Bell could go 90 if needed. And so that was a great indicator, great sign to me that while we're technically down if Parker's out, we're down our top 3 center backs at this point, from Nilsson to Hebert to Parker. We're looking at a Bartlett, a Yarrow, a Bell, and possibly a Selmer Pedro, who's been talked about this week as a potential left center back option, because we know how great John Nelson's been playing out on the left back side. There are options on the roster, but that center back position is definitely far from ideal going into RSL.
Yeah, and I think there has been a lot of talk about next man up mentality, and this will be a great way to continue proving that and give either Yarrow or John Bell a chance to play.
Yeah, so going into RSL though, St. Louis sits kind of pretty in the statistics. So we talked about how Klaus has 4 straight games with goal contributions. From a league perspective, we have some top of the league players and team stats going into RSL to keep in mind. So Klaus is second in the league in goals with 3, and he leads the league in goals inside the 18 with 3. So that's a fun stat for Klaus. Edward Leuven still sits second in the league with 3 assists, thanks to the fact that he didn't get one on the Joaquini goal. Could be leading the league in that one. Roman Berkey, we haven't talked about his distribution, but he sits fourth in the league in long passes with 35. And as a team, St. Louis City is tied for the league lead with Atlanta in goals with 11. And we lead the league in goals inside the 18. We talked about it earlier with 10 goals inside the 18, Ostrax being the only one outside. And St. Louis sits fourth in expected goals with 6.66. So some good attacking numbers going into RSL. I think the question to me with Real Salt Lake is going to be similar to the Quakes in the sense that it's a pressing team and it's whatever the opposite of a pressing team is. It's possession, it's slow build up. It's not anything that has an overly high visibility on their striking. They really don't have any player. First of all, they've only scored 3 goals all season long. They've played 3 matches. They had a bye last week, and RSL won their first match against Vancouver Whitecaps 2-1 at Vancouver. They lost to Seattle in week 2, 0-2 or 2-0. And they lost 2 weeks ago, their last match at home against Austin 2-1. So the form isn't quite there. They had a bye last week, like I said. There's an altitude question. They're about 4,000 feet above sea level compared to St. Louis. The weather is going to be awful in Salt Lake, or I think we saw it's a chance of snow. It might be in the 20s.
There is a chance of a snow, and
Yeah.
somebody I was talking to earlier this week that has a podcast in Salt Lake. They mentioned that when Real Salt Lake plays in the snow, they have been undefeated. That every time the yellow ball or orange ball comes out,
uh,
Real Salt Lake wins. So another trend that CDSC may break this weekend.
I was gonna say there's also a streak of one game, or the only game St. Louis City's ever played in 20-degree weather where we have yet to concede a goal. You can make a lot of different arguments with that kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
what do you think we're going to see out of this Real Salt Lake lineup, who themselves are not 100% for a few different reasons?
Yeah, so obviously they don't come to this match in good form, and they're also missing some pieces due to international duty. One of them, Brian Ojeda,
Mm-hmm.
midfielder that has started their 3 games, also will be missing Rubio Rubin, which he had a great year in 2021. Last year he didn't play a lot because injuries and other things. And this year they're gonna be for this game they're gonna be missing him because he's on international duty. And Luna, who is more like a depth piece, he's also with the US U20s. So even though we're missing some pieces, they are also missing some key pieces. They lost a couple of players that left the team. Their main goal scorer last year, Sergio Cordova,
Yep.
he signed with Vancouver Whitecaps, and they still haven't found a number 9 to replace him. So I think City has a good opportunity to continue the undefeated streak, either win or tie. But one thing to keep in mind is that RSL had 2 weeks to prepare for this match.
Yep.
Um, so they will be ready. Obviously, and Carnell has mentioned this because he has been out. Oh, now people know like St. Louis presses and how it plays, and he's like, yeah, that's where like the chess match begins. Like, I'm not going to do always the same. I'm gonna have some tricks, some different plays that I'm going to use. So I'm sure he will have a different plan, but you don't know. Like now that City has won 4 in a row, every team is going to want to end that streak. They don't want to be part of that conversation. Oh, you're one of the teams that lost to CDSC during that 5 winning streak or 6, whatever it is. So that's another. Now St. Louis is a target for all these teams.
Oh yeah. And so that leaves them Real Salt Lake in particular kind of shorthanded in a similar way that St. Louis is. One of the things, or one of the players rather, with Real Salt Lake is Jefferson Savarino that I think we should discuss. So Savarino himself was called into international duty but stayed home for personal reasons. We didn't know at first what that meant, but all indications are that he will play. And Jefferson Savarino himself, the number 10 in his jersey number, plays out on the left side, is their designated player. And they have one on their roster, and it's Savarino. He was second on the team last year with 7 goals, second on the team with 6 assists. He is their guy, I think. He's the most dangerous player that they're going to have on the offensive side of the field, especially with Rubin out. And he's kind of the guy that I think St. Louis needs to be watching on RSL's left side. So the battle between him and maybe Leuven or Vasilev in the midfield, and especially with Jake Nerwinski out on the right-hand side. To me, Nerwinski and Savarino are going to be a potential battle to keep an eye on throughout the game. But more so than that, I think so far in this year, so Savarino has good credentials going into the year, but hasn't really found net or hasn't really found his form yet this year, it seems. Justin Glad, of all people, Justin Glad, number 15 on the field. He's a 26-year-old homegrown defender, and he leads RSL in goals with 2. So I said
He's
earlier
a but he's a center back.
he is a center back, which is a little more bizarre because especially in St. Louis' system, you're used to some of the fullbacks getting involved in the attack. But Glad homegrown defender, and he not only has leading the team in goals with 2, but he also leads the team in passing. So the stats that I have are that he has 155 successful passes, 182 passing attempts, most successes on the team by 19, and most attempts on the team by 30. So he's not just the guy who's been able to finish for them, but he's also one of their main facilitators. It's an interesting notion based on how they play that their main ball facilitator, the guy who spends the most time with the ball, as well as their primary scorer so far this year, is a center back. I think the press that City has and the way that we tend to keep teams on their toes and either make them uncomfortable, force them out of their position, something they're not comfortable with. That has the chance to disrupt Glad. And if we can disrupt Glad, I think that bodes extremely well based on how integral he's been to the system of RSL.
Yeah, and another piece that is not on the stats for this year, but that may play against City, is Pablo Ruiz. He has scored, I think it was 5 or 6 goals. Yeah, 5 goals, 5 assists last year. He's center midfielder, but he was out the first 3 games because he was back in Argentina getting his green card, but he's back and he may be available for this game. So that's a new piece that may be part of the lineup this weekend.
Yeah, I remember having him on my MLS fantasy team last year a few times, and I was disappointed every single time. So maybe I should pick him up. Maybe I should pick him up again and be disappointed on my fantasy team, but excited about my real life team. That will change
Okay.
though. That will change their potential, how they look, but also I think that helps to fill a little bit of the gap from a Rubin,
Mhm.
from an Ojeda being out. So that you're definitely right. That will be interesting. If you're just joining us here, we are Flyover Footy. We're a St. Louis-based soccer podcast on the Big 550 KTRS, leading you into St. Louis City's matchup against Real Salt Lake tonight, match week 5, as St. Louis looks to go 5-0 to start the season. I'm Matt Baker here with Santiago Beltran. And Santi, as we continue to look at RSL and what City is going to go up against, going back to something Bradley Carnell was mentioning in the press conference this week, he noted Glad, he noted Savarino that we discussed. Another person that he mentioned is Damir Kralik, number 8 for RSL, their Croatian midfielder with a goal. And so far this year, leading the team in shots with 5 and shots on goal with 3. His work in the midfield as more of that, I don't know, box to box or playmaking, dangerous in and around the attacking box. That's another one of those attacking pieces that RSL is probably going to rely heavily on, that I think our defensive midfielders have a great opportunity, along with whichever center backs decide to play, in neutralizing that. This to me is where Tim Parker may have been incredibly valuable, to where he often neutralizes the balls that come directly into the box, or as players come and attack the box from that midfield perspective. So I wonder if Bartlett or uh, whether it's Bell or Yarrow end up starting there. I wonder how effective Bartlett in particular can be as he continues to take over that Tim Parker role against this RSL side.
Yeah, and another player that will be interesting to see, and Carnell mentioned him today, is Andres Gomez,
Yes.
Colombian winger.
Yep.
He's one of the new additions for this year, and he started for the first time last game. He said good things about him, that he's really good on the right wing. He hasn't scored yet this year, but when I talked to this podcast host from Real Salt Lake earlier this week, he said he looked good at that game. Looked like he had some like, in terms of finishing the chance he had. He maybe there was some anxiety about his scoring, but he didn't take advantage and didn't finish. But a lot of things are expected from him. He had a lot of success in the Colombian Colombian league, and he's one of the U22
Yep.
signings. He's only 20 years old, so hopefully it will take him another game to start playing at the level that he's supposed to show for Real Salt Lake.
Between Gomez and Pablo Ruiz, I think the situational opportunity that City has in landing RSL on the schedule right now is one of those blessings that we need to consider. So between the international call ups that they have and just now getting these players back or in Gomez's case, I think City can use that as, if they don't start, and then that's an opportunity right there. But if they do start, there hasn't been a whole lot of prep time, even with their bye week last week, that City doesn't probably have a whole lot of tape on them. Carnell mentioned today that they don't often play game plan based on strictly their opponent. They take into consideration, like he said, who are some of their bigger players to keep in mind, how are they going to move the ball, but they stick with their style. And so far that's gotten them 4 wins in a row. So taking into consideration the new players, the players who are gone, this seems to be like, if we didn't hit them now and we hit them next week, even though it would be the second week of the international potentially, or as they're coming right back, it would be a whole lot of a different RSL team. And regardless of the weather, regardless of the altitude, this is the opportunity St. Louis has to continue playing their style and have it meaningfully impact the team that has a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, I think we're getting them at a good time, and maybe it will be five in a row. Maybe not, but I think St. Louis has a good chance to tie or get a that fifth win. In Spanish, we have a saying that says "No hay quinto malo," so it's like there is no like a fifth thing happening that isn't bad. So maybe that will happen this time.
I love it. So there's a lot of stats you can go into about how RSL is playing, but I think the fact that they have the second lowest expected goals in open play in the league, they've got the second highest expected goals against. So there's a lot of things, that a lot of arguments you can use to make this look really good for City. With a lot of the personnels aside, just how RSL has been playing, what their style is, how they allow teams to press against them. The fact that they don't force a lot of high turnovers, whereas we do. There's a lot of dichotomies going on where they're at one end of the spectrum in stats and we're at another. But ultimately, it's an away game in MLS. And MLS matches aside, any given Saturday, something new could happen, or something different. A crazy goal could be introduced, a crazy call could happen. The altitude could play a factor into some of these players. As much as you game plan for that, it's still just that intangible. But away matches in general, like you had mentioned earlier, that you can start looking to how many points does a typical MLS playoff team have at the end of the season. Well, at the same time, I think it's for St. Louis City fans, it's important to remember that you win the games you're supposed to win, and most of those happen at home. When you're on the road in MLS, regardless of the table position of the team, a tie is often viewed as an extremely good result on the road, especially given these intangibles. So as we try to think about what are our expectations for this game, what do we expect the score to be? What do we expect the lineups to be? That's something that we need to keep in mind is that, like you said, the streak is going to end at some point. And if it ends, if the winning streak ends and we still come away with this with an unbeaten streak and 1 point, that's something that we should be incredibly happy with, especially given our position going into this with our player availability.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna end at some point, and I will sign on a tie this weekend. Like if I had to sign the dotted line right now, I'll say, okay, I'll take the tie, considering that it is a tough place to play at, and that we're missing some key pieces. I will take that any day.
Okay, so before we get into the predictions and you have to put your name on the dotted line of the score, how do we think the lineup is going to look? So we've spitballed we spitballed Parker, we spitballed Blome. Put some names down here. Formation, names. What do you think, Santi?
Okay, so I think we're gonna go Berkey, and then center backs we're gonna go Lucas Bartlett, John Bell,
Hmm?
then Nelson Nerwinski. So the new thing there is John Bell
Yep.
getting his first minutes with the team, and then basically I think I'm gonna go 4-3-2-1. I think that 4-2-2 is more for home games, but I could be wrong. But yeah, what I have is that that 4-3-2-1. So then we're gonna have Leuven, Leuven, escaping my mind. Sorry.
Vasilev?
Yeah, Leuven and Basilev. Thanks, Matt. And then the question is, do you play Rasmus Alm or do you play Ostrak?
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna go with Ostrak since he scored last time. Then Jared Stroud. Then up front, Klaus.
Yep.
And am I missing somebody?
I think that was it. If you had those three midfielders.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I have. What do you have, Matt?
Similar. I think I think it's gonna be that 4-2-3-1 where we have my center backs are gonna be Yarrow and Bartlett. I really have a tough time because Carnell talked about Bell today, but it was almost in response to a question about Bell.
Right.
I know Yarrow has seen minutes. This is also partially me just wanting to see Josh Yarrow get more of an opportunity. I know he was supposed to come into the match against the Quakes, but Joe Aquini ended up needing to be subbed there in the dying minutes, so Yarrow didn't see the match. I like Nelson, Yarrow, Bartlett, and Nerwinski on the back line. I like Leuven and Vasilev in that defensive midfield, kind of the 6-8 roles there, giving Leuven flexibility, but I think those two are the answer to our midfield. And then I want to see Joe Aquini on the field, but I just
Mm.
have a feeling that we're going to see Joe Aquini sub in the second half when we need more fresh legs in this altitude. And so I've got our front attackers as Stroud, Ostrak, Alm, and then Klaus up top. So I think Carnell had some really high marks on Alm. Alm hasn't found the back of the net. He's our only attacker who's reliably played. So I would love to see a goal out of him, but I definitely think we'll see him in the lineup, and that still provides some offensive flexibility, whether it's Joe Aquini or Celio Pompeu, or if anybody else if Isak Jensen makes an appearance. So I like that. And then real quick before we go, Santi, predictions on the scoreline.
Well, I already predicted. I'm gonna stick to the score I went with on another show, and I kind of picked that just because other people had picked something else. So this may be a high scoring. I went with a 2-2.
Ooh. So you are putting your name to the dotted line of the tie.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like
I'm
it.
not gonna change what I said earlier in the week. So yes, 2-2.
I like it. Being consistent. Perfect. I'm going to go with a 2-1 score with St. Louis winning. I'm gonna ride the winning streak until it fails me, and then we'll start to reevaluate. I want to see Alm get on the score sheet, and I'll say Leuven's gonna go with another goal.
Leuven.
Yeah,
Okay.
set piece goal.
No. Okay. Hey, you heard it from you heard it from Matt here, and I think you have been like spot on the predictions, like the last 2 or 3 games, right?
Pretty close. I think on this pod last week I said 3-0, but I wavered on that official app scoring thing, so we'll see. But that's all the time we have right now on the Big 550 KTRS. Thank you for joining us. This has been Flyover Footy with Santiago. My name is Matt Baker. Enjoy the game, and we'll talk to you next time.